Dylan? Good grief, Kelly's not even fit to be in the same room with you. He's a poor excuse for a man.
I know that.
Welcome to week 89 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
We both watched episode 430 yesterday, which originally aired Monday, April 7th, 1986. Of course, Diane's most interested in the Kelly storyline. Kelly tells Nick that she bought all his books. He says, that's fine. I'm paraphrasing. She also tells him she slept with Dylan. He's not so much upset that she slept with Dylan, but that she waited till a couple hours before the wedding to tell him. And he says, there's only one reason you would wait until today, because you know there's no way the wedding can go through now. So it's all about the fact that you don't really want to marry me. And
I don't think he's wrong, actually.
Yeah. I think, he's not Joe, right? I think she's just trying to find something to replace Joe. And I don't know, maybe just poor timing. She talks about how, you fell in love with me when I didn't have any memory. And then I spent a lot of time trying to live up to that when I got it back. And anyway, she has a lot of excuses for why it didn't work. But
I think at the end of the day, he's just, for whatever reason, not enough for her.
Yeah, I guess it's just not really what she is looking for.
Yeah. And I think she's making these excuses because she knows he's a really great guy. Everyone really likes him. So, but I think he knows that. I think he knows that, that whatever he is not what she needs. So
somewhere between Joe and Peter, there might be someone out there. So basically, after several conversations at the gazebo and later at Buzz's, and he's basically like, just leave me alone. I mean, what's the point in talking anymore? So
I think he's pretty much done with all the excuses, to be honest.
So really, I don't know if Nick has much going for him as a character on Santa Barbara, if this just cuts off, and as we're predicting, Dylan's not long for the show. He's just out there like a loose thing orbiting the cast. He's got a little bit with his detective business, maybe, that he could start. But I mean, how many interactions with the rest of the cast can you have there? Maybe he and Julia is a possibility if Pearl's focused on Courtney now. But I mean, I would see perhaps him being involved in some big storyline, if there's some kind of epic showdown or reckoning with Dylan, perhaps. But at this point, this isn't so much one idea we talked about was Dylan coming in and trashing their wedding, basically. This is more a mutual understanding that this just isn't going to happen between these two characters. He can certainly loathe Dylan, as so many of us do, but it's really about him and Kelly, no matter what Dylan's done. So I feel like unless he's going to be part of some big reckoning in Dylan's storyline, as you say, they could keep him around if they have another female character who they want to pursue a storyline with. But otherwise, long term, I'm not seeing something past the May sweeps, really. Maybe they'll surprise us.
And because he and Kelly have come to this decision, like, I couldn't even see him getting involved in a new character and her being part of a sort of threat to that.
Well, yeah, and it's also kind of like be weird for him to keep orbiting any of the Capwell family after this devastating turn of events, right?
Yeah.
Everyone would feel weird about it.
You might still hang out with Brick a bit or whatever, but it's not like with Cruz and Eden where they have this great love dependent, irregardless of who else they're married to. And that's always going to be a threat to whatever other relationships they're in. He and Kelly are Nick and Kelly are just done. So
I mean, when you talk about hanging out with Brick and Amy, I mean, they've almost become, definitely Amy has become not a main character in the show. She's someone
No.
that hangs around with another character on the show.
yeah,
And Brick hasn't done a lot lately. He is related to Lionel and Sophia and has his job, but he's almost secondary character, even with all that. And
Yeah.
Nick hanging out with those two would be like, okay, we've all the characters have nothing to do, just hang out with each other. They wouldn't really, they couldn't really show them watching a movie on TV every episode. So
no.
they're kind of like, you can't have too much dead wood in a cast, really.
No, and I mean the most they would be used for, those three, if that continued, would be the filler in a wedding episode for someone else, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. It might
Yeah,
become like Danny, where we see him every 3
Yeah.
months.
Exactly. Now I'm hoping with this move of Brick working for CC, we're going to see a lot more of him in the storyline, perhaps, and I can see the potential for him to get a bit more coverage in the show. I actually hope so, because there's a lot of angles that could be played through that character. But yeah, I definitely see Amy falling further and further by the wayside. And as you say, I just don't see a lot for Nick especially once Dylan's out of the way.
I don't know if they've got any story planned for Amy. Maybe when Robin Wright leaves to film The Princess Bride for a couple months, maybe they'll plan something for Amy during that time.
Mm-hmm.
We will see. So Kelly, of course, has to tell Cece. And Cece says, "You're more like your mother than I realized." Yeah, because she has to tell him that she slept with Dylan. And Kelly says, "Why is that so completely different from you?" Because, well, not necessarily exactly the same. It's like Cece's very, very selfish and does a lot of dumb things.
But I did really like his visceral reaction when she said she had slept with Dylan. It's like this recoil of disgust.
Mm-hmm.
That so many of us felt as well.
Yeah, I wonder if I highlighted this phrase. There was quite a hilarious thing. Oh yeah, Cece says, "You slept with Dylan. He's not even fit to be in the same room as you. He's a poor excuse for a man." So.
Which shows the difference in how, Dylan kind of thinks of himself as hot stuff, but it shows the difference between how everyone else regards Dylan next to Nick, who everyone was really happy about her marrying. I think the only sort of reservation they had about her marrying Nick was the feeling that she wasn't really as into it as she should have been.
Cece breaks the news to Sophia, and he says, "I couldn't stop myself from chastising her. You're never like that with the children. They always come to you first because I always interfere." So it's a nice thing for Cece to realize, and made for a nice conversation with Sophia, and they start talking about things, and Sophia ends with, "Most things in life aren't too late," which they were talking about something else, but I guess maybe a double meaning there, that Sophia and Cece are not necessarily over forever.
Yeah.
Kelly tells Ted, and then she says to Ted, "Maybe I don't even know what love is." So this, she may still have to find herself. Something she was planning to do months ago. Pearl runs out to the car to phone an ambulance. The maid returns with the hotel manager, who holds a gun on Pearl. I think that's true, right? He had a gun, right? So Pearl never gets a chance to call 911. Cruz gets a call at the Capwell mansion, where they're all waiting for the wedding to start, about Madeline being found dead. He and Courtney arrive to find Pearl being arrested. And Courtney screams at him for killing her sister. So she completely freaks out over it, obviously, and immediately believes that it was Pearl, no matter what he's protesting. at the police station, I think. Julia insists on knowing Pearl's real name if she is to represent him. And I really thought we were going to get something here, because Pearl's like, no, what difference does it make what's on my passport? I'm still the same person. And Julia and Cruz note at one point his accent does slip. And it's quite a long scene, and I really thought it was building to Pearl revealing everything. But he ends up saying, well, if you don't want to be my attorney under these circumstances, I don't need one. So, and then she did stick around because Cruz said, I don't want him to be questioned without an attorney even in the room. And she says, this is going to look bad for a jury that you won't even answer the simplest questions. And, the prosecution is going to investigate your past and it will all be revealed. He goes, well, if it comes out, then it does. So he's still is very secretive to his detriment. He tells Cruz that he had brought Madeline to that bungalow 8 or 9 times. And Cruz brings up the incident with the pearl necklace, and Pearl basically relates the tale and how Courtney was on his side with that. And then Cruz, well, and that's another motive. Maybe you did it for Courtney, Pearl's bail is set at $200,000. I was expecting Pearl to pull out a checkbook and say, no problem. But he calls the ambassador. Now, is his dad an ambassador? Is that what is going on? Or are his parents in another country and he has to go through an ambassador? But he ends up hanging up, saying, no, I can't do that. Then a mysterious person pays his bail who wants to remain nameless. And I was certain it was going to be Julia. But very quickly, it's revealed to be Courtney. And Courtney says that she knows he's innocent. When she was back at the Capwell mansion, she suddenly had a flash of memory of something she saw lying on the carpet at the bungalow, which looked like, I thought at first it was like a gold bullet, could have been a lipstick, something like that. And then
perhaps it was like I used cigarette, maybe like one of the dark European.
It did look like it was gold painted, though, whatever it was. And it must be something so distinctive that someone Courtney knows, has that or uses it or whatever it is. So Pearl says, oh, you must know who's guilty then, but she doesn't say anything. She then actually returns to the bungalow, and the officer there kind of lets her stomp around a little bit. But when she goes to pick up the gold cylinder, he says, no, that's evidence. And he puts it in a bag. So, remember that she saw someone leaving the bungalow at one point too, right? So that may be the same person, or she may put that together. Cece calls David Laurent in New York, but he's not available. The first thing I thought of is, does that mean he's flying back from Santa Barbara, having just killed his wife?
I don't know.
But
I found the whole scene with Pearl being questioned really interesting because, as you say, for most of it, Cruz seems very skeptical of Pearl's account. I actually thought Pearl gave quite a good account of himself that made sense, that. And, at one point he actually says, I don't know why the maid was screaming. And I don't think anyone watching it really knew why she was just screaming for no reason either. But, I thought he gave quite a good account. And then later, when he refuses to give his true identity, I did sort of see the wall breaking, I think, a little between him and Cruz, and Cruz, I think, getting quite concerned that he was really going to need some help. And I felt that, we were seeing a little more Cruz taking off his detective hat just a little bit in that scene.
I think it's good for Pearl that he's got several friends in town. I don't think he's going to feel like he's been cut loose, especially now with Courtney back on his side.
Yeah, and she's a powerful ally.
So at first I thought that Courtney maybe is the murderer herself too, because maybe she dropped that thing or whatever. Because when Pearl said, oh, well, then you know who it is, she didn't say anything. So I'm wondering, does she have like a split personality or something? Or did she kill Madeline for whatever and then block it out and then only remember it? So that's another possibility.
She had a very touching story about her childhood with Madeline and how Madeline had, really stood up for her in that. So there definitely seems to have been a bond between them, even though Madeline was obviously a very difficult person. But yeah, we'll just have to see sort of how it goes. Remember, at this point, Pearl's just out on bail. So I'm assuming we can expect some kind of trial or some kind of at least lead up to a trial where we will actually find out a bit more about his actual identity.
Yeah, maybe for the May sweeps, it'll be another big trial. And maybe that's why, I'm seeing Madeline still appearing in several episodes. Maybe that's where the flashbacks will occur. People will be on the stand. I can't imagine it could be as big as the other trials we had last summer, some of which, ended up being truncated. But yeah, who knows if there's other players involved that we don't even know about. There may be this whole group of witnesses that ends up coming in. So,
well, we don't know about Madeline's husband, how much of a potential power player he is. He, or anyone else who is implicated in her death may really have the means and the motive to sort of pile it on Pearl as much as possible.
Well, that's true. Yeah, there could be people working against Pearl as
exactly. Well. And plus, we don't actually know a lot about Pearl's background beyond the fact that it's obviously quite privileged. But whatever information comes out about that could perhaps even have some implications for, maybe his family are big wheeler dealers in Europe or something. Maybe they're actually competitors with CC. Maybe, maybe he can at the very least put a little bit of perspective on CC's newly found paintings. And
that would actually be funny if Pearl realized they were all fakes. Well, he was in the basement already. He's already seen them in that basement, but maybe it was too dark in there.
I mean, maybe he owns the originals. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It could be in his other chamber. So maybe his second apartment will come out during the investigation. I just don't see Julia cutting herself entirely loose from this. I think she's going to.
No, I think she's intrigued by the mystery of Pearl. I don't think she sees him so much. I think she's fond of him. I don't think he's her great love of her life or anything, but I think she's intrigued by the mystery of him.
Haley is making the bed at Angel's while Gina hangs around in her costume and contemplates Kirk's situation. She says if they're expecting to find something as cold and heartless as Kirk's heart, they'll be waiting forever. Angel arrives and hits on Haley yet again, and Gina tells Angel to stop drooling over her niece. Haley reports back that Madeline is not dead after all, but she is brain dead. So they found some very light traces of a pulse. And Gina, having done some research on heart transplants today, realizes that Madeline is the perfect candidate to donate a heart. She's under 40. No, she's under 30. No, how'd it go? Yeah, Kirk's under 50. She's under 40. And she died due to a brain injury, which I guess means the heart was not damaged. So she tells Haley she needs to push that narrative with the Capwells, get them to donate Madeline's heart to Kirk. So I think she is feeling her best option is for Kirk to live because the tape alone, I guess she doesn't think will exonerate her enough. But if Kirk lives, he knows about all the other stuff, like pulling the plug. That's not really mentioned on the tape. So I don't know if it's mentioned on the tape. So
I was kind of thinking about this a little bit because it seemed like at one point Gina felt her best move was perhaps to eliminate or sideline Kirk, and now she seems quite anxious to save him. So
Haley brings it up with Ted, in actually quite an organic way, it looked like. And I think Ted said, "Oh, I'd already been kind of thinking that," or someone already mentioned that. So when Cece gets off the phone with Madeline's husband, who's in New York, they mention it to him, and he says it's a good idea. But it's strictly up to David Laurent, who will be arriving in a few hours. So we will see Madeline's husband, presumably. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say this is where it's kind of convenient that Madeline was so obnoxious, because no one's really that sentimental about, giving away organs or whatever.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if David Laurent will try to get some money out of Cece in exchange for agreeing or something. We don't know what he's like at all, right?
We don't know.
So we will finally see David, probably tomorrow's episode. Doesn't take that long to get from New York to Santa Barbara.
No, we're zipping along quite quickly.
Mm-hmm. We have, I guess, two potentials. So we got three potential suspects. Assuming Madeline was seeing someone, then could have been that someone's husband or wife. Could have been Courtney, who's secretly crazy, or could have been David. So we got three suspects already. So we have three suspects. We've got David Laurent, we've got Courtney, if she's crazy, and we have the wife of whoever Madeline was seeing, assuming that is what she was doing. I mean, she may actually have been, doing secret planning. Maybe she was meeting with Grant, plotting to take over Capwell Enterprises, right? So it might not have been anything like that. So maybe Grant Capwell has secretly been in town this whole time. So that is it. There are just three major things, a few characters just kind of meandered through because there was a wedding. So Ted had the odd scene here and there. Sophia had the odd scene here and there. Amy and Brick, or Amy and Brick, or was that yesterday? But yeah, basically focused on those main things. So that's it for episode 430.
I'm assuming in this next month, as we make our way towards the sweeps, we'll see more about whatever fate has in store for Dylan, and we'll see the continuing unspooling of Mary and Mark's marriage as well.
Mm-hmm. And we've got a great surprise coming up next week, I believe, if I remember correctly. And kind of have some vague memories of some fun stuff happening during the May sweeps. So we'll see if I'm thinking about the right storyline in the right year. All right. Well, we'll be back tomorrow after we watch episode 431. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Just keep it covered when my niece is around. What are you doing here?
Well, waiting to be invited to fashionable parties, mostly. Well, now that I'm about to be an eligible bachelor, I can't just hang out and sulk.
Well, guess who is coming? Who? I said guess. Frank the milkman. Close. Lionel the ex-husband.
I will go to the maitre d' and ask him to put on some music. And then, perhaps, we can face it and dance, huh?
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 431. I watched it today, and you watched it yesterday. You're actually ahead of me. Originally aired Tuesday, April 8th, 1986. And I'm at my parents' home in West Kelowna for a few days. I was thinking about Mom. She passed away a year ago, and we've got Mother's Day coming up on Santa Barbara in a few weeks. So I bought some of Mama's favorite flowers, carnations, but they are yellow because she said never, ever get white carnations. She didn't even know about Peter Flint. So. Well, there were four major plot threads in this episode. Mason has Bobby describe her attacker to a sketch artist. So he's moving along very quickly with this. Mary sees the drawing and asks why Mason has a drawing of Mark. Mason looks at it and says, I didn't even think of that. Mason hires a PI to follow Mark. He thinks if Mark goes to the seedier side of town, that might be a something, I guess. And Mason surprises Mark in an adult movie theater. He leans over Mark and goes, "Oh, there's a better one playing down the block." And Mark runs out the door. And then after collecting himself, Mark phones Mason. Mason says, "Is this an obscene call?" Mark asks to meet Mason. So at the gazebo, Mary asks Mason not to tell Mary that he was in an adult theater. Mason says, "Well, I was there because of a case, but I wonder why you were there." Mark says, "Oh, I'm a doctor and I've always heard about these things. I thought I should see what they are." It's just terrible. Like, I had no interest in it whatsoever. So after Mark leaves, Bobby comes out of the bushes where Mason has planted her, and she confirmed that was the man who beat her up. So very clever Mason, and he gets his investigating done a lot quicker than Cruz. I mean, this has been half an episode, and he solved it. Meanwhile, Cruz is still working on something from months ago.
So I guess the next question is where Mason takes it from here.
Yes, there's always a potential of trying to blackmail Mark rather than, and especially since Bobby didn't want to go to the police. Presumably, she won't want to go to the courts either. That pretty much just leaves some sort of financial settlement.
And of course, how is Mary going to find out? She's already seen the sketch and knows it is in connection with a criminal case.
Yeah, I think Mark's on thin ice, even if he pays off Bobby. I mean, what if Bobby comes down to the clinic when Mary's there and says something about some sleazy guy who attacked her, and I don't know, maybe somehow the sketch gets mentioned or something, and Mary realizes it's Mark she's talking about.
Now, I'm assuming Mark is engaging in this behavior because he's having trouble performing in the bedroom, but it does kind of beg the question of what else Janice was warning Mary about. So did he have perhaps some of these issues when he was with Janice, or was it more a concern about his temper and his willingness to walk on the wild side?
She tells Mason that Mark was not able to perform in bed and says, "I wouldn't be surprised if it's the sex thing that makes him so angry." So perhaps he had that briefly before with Janice, although it seems like the opposite is true based on their last interaction. So Augusta plans an elaborate party at the Orient Express to celebrate her divorce. Lionel wangles an invitation. He says, "Now that I'm an eligible bachelor, I just can't hang around and sulk." Augusta tells Julia that one by one, her guests have been calling to cancel. Now, at this point, I thought, I wonder if Lionel's behind that. I wonder if Lionel has called all their friends and asked them to cancel somehow. Augusta asks Julia, "Guess who's coming?" Julia says, "Frank the milkman?"
It's a good guess, actually.
Augusta says, "Lionel, the ex-husband." And in the end, only Lionel shows up. Lionel says, "I will go to the maitre d' and ask him to put on a little music. Then we can face it and dance." So once again, put the idea in my head, maybe Lionel set that whole thing up so he could dance with Augusta. Augusta seems, very sad that her marriage has ended. And,
I think she's very vulnerable right now, especially since her party fizzled out. And I think probably also in a way as well, selling the paintings has obviously been quite lucrative for her, but that's definitely a parting shot at her marriage as well.
In the bungalow, Julia observes as Pearl reenacts his actions after the murder for Cruz. David Laurent comes in and attacks Pearl. So we get our first meeting of David Laurent. Is he as handsome as Madeline claimed he was? Cruz says Pearl might be innocent. And so David, unlike almost every other soap opera character ever, who would double down on insisting it was Pearl over that one little fact that he was there, says, "Oh, well, in that case, I want you to catch the guy who did it." So he seemed to take Cruz's statement at a fact that it's probably not Pearl. So, yeah, so that's actually kind of a cool thing. Cruz asks David if he ever fought with Madeline, and he says they fought all the time. And then he tells Cruz's tale of their first time in Paris and how much he loved Madeline. Cruz asks him also why he didn't answer the phone when he was called right after the murder. So Cruz is on the right track, I'm thinking, at least with, David. If he's not the murderer, then he's just on the wrong right track. But he's at least doing his police work properly. Just as quickly as Gina thought, oh, Madeline would make a good heart for Kirk. Cruz is checking the alibi, and David does say, oh yeah, the husband is always the first suspect, isn't he? So he says, well, I was doing work and the phone rings all day, so I just don't answer it. And Cruz has that look on his face, like the I don't quite believe you look that he often has. And he says, oh, I phoned my secretary at least twice. I'm like, what does that mean? You could phone her from anywhere. You could have phoned her from the airport in Santa Barbara. You could have phoned her from Madeline's room. So Cruz checks up on that later on. Cruz says to Cece, Kirk always wanted to be a Capwell, and now he's going to have a Capwell heart.
Yeah.
So that is a cool and very perceptive statement on Cruz's part. And I wonder,
of course, CC responds to this by doubling down that Kirk was always a Capwell in his eyes, which is sort of funny when we think about how much Eden is not really caring for her marriage to Kirk anymore.
CC says he doesn't need it to be a Capwell.
Yeah.
CC then, CC always seems to say something nasty after someone said something he doesn't like, because he then follows up with, I hope your friendship with Pearl doesn't color your investigation. You've been known not to be impartial, which is really, something, considering it was the fact that he was covering up for Cece's daughter and protecting the Capwell family that Cece is now trying to use against him. Cruz later checks up on David's alibi, and we don't actually hear the response on the other end of the phone. He says, oh, I want to confirm that David was such and such a place on that day. We don't actually hear what the answer is. So Cruz is at the same time examining the cigarette end that's in the evidence bag. And also a report comes in that Madeline called Eden from the bungalow just before she died. Don't really know how it's relevant, but the fact that they made it the ending scene for Cruz in this episode maybe means it's going to be somehow relevant, or it's just a reason for Cruz to visit Eden up in Stanford.
I kind of think it's more that, because I think anything to do with Eden is kind of triggering for Cruz. So anything that sets up a meeting with them is going to be emotional. And so that's how I took his reaction.
We will find out in the next episode, I would think.
Yeah.
So, we've still got the cigarette end to be examined, and I don't know what other evidence there could be. That may be the only evidence we have, but maybe phone records, the fact that they were looking at phone records for the bungalow may give them more info that we don't know about, that no one knows about.
It did occur to me, being introduced to David, and certainly maybe influenced by some of the line of questioning, that, David would be a fairly good suspect. I could actually picture David dressing up as a woman to, commit the murder.
It's weird, because when he came on, I said, oh, he has a very fine bone structure.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting. Maybe he was the woman in the white dress that walked past Pearl's car.
That's what I was thinking was a possibility, and might have been a reason why he was willing to go along with, him with Cruz saying that Pearl may not be a suspect, because if that was the case, he would know that the next in line as a suspect would perhaps be a tall woman in a white dress.
We will see. I don't remember anything at all about David Lorenz. So
I mean, that was just something that crossed my mind.
Something did cross my mind later about David, but we'll get to that. Cruz asks Courtney if Madeline had any enemies. Courtney says Madeline used to have temper tantrums, but she says, I guess I just kind of ignored them. He asks Courtney about Madeline and David's marriage. And Courtney says Madeline never confided in her. So, but the whole episode, every time she sees David, she stares at him. So I don't know if Madeline maybe did confide in her.
She seems kind of cagey around David. She's not effusive in how much she enjoys his company or how great she thinks he is.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something there, I feel.
Yeah, and Courtney doesn't want to tell Pearl who she thinks the killer is, because he kind of has pushed her, saying, well, if you know it wasn't me, then you must think you know who it is. And Pearl says that he's worried that the killer might come after her if they catch on that Courtney thinks she knows who it is. And then Pearl goes in to kiss her, and they cut to commercial, and we never see how that ended.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of the opposite of all the Cruz and Eden scenes, where it's like every little move is sort of chronicled and you practically see everything they do in slow motion. And with this particular romance, it's just cut off.
Mm-hmm. And then the next time we see Courtney, she's in a scene all by herself. So, yeah, we don't know how that went. I'm sure we'll find out in the next episode too. Very quickly, David agrees to have Madeline's heart transplanted into Kirk. I say very quickly. I mean, he hemmed and hawed about it, for part of the episode. But, soap opera time, a half an episode is actually pretty quick. So, he agrees to have Madeline's heart transplanted into Kirk Cranston, and Julia brings him the papers to sign. And he says, is that Miss or Mrs. Wainwright? And Julia says, I'm not married. And I'm thinking, is David already hitting on Julia the day after his wife has been killed? And if he is that kind of creep, then maybe he's exactly Julia's type based on Jack Stanfield Lee. So, because she did not blow off that obvious question, she seemed happy to have been asked it. So, interesting. He says he feels like he's murdering Madeline a second time by signing the papers. Cece gets the call that Madeline has been taken off life support, and Cece hugs Courtney, and David stares into Courtney's eyes during that hug. Later, David finds Courtney looking through his suitcase, where she has found a silver cigarette case. Now, I don't know if that cigarette case looked very manly. So I'm wondering if it was Madeline's or something. I don't know. Because I guess it's David's cigarettes that she would have. We haven't seen David smoke, though. So did we see Madeline smoke?
No, we haven't seen. The only person I think we've seen ever smoking on Santa Barbara was Augusta. And that was just early on, the first couple episodes.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. We haven't seen any of the characters smoke, but I mean, it's clear she thinks it's David, and the thing is in David's case. So interesting, of the sort of 4 storylines we've had going, Julia was in 3 of them. She had contact with Augusta, Pearl, and David. So she's unmatched with anyone, but work-wise, she's got stuff to do. So it's good to see her not being set by the wayside like all these Lockridges we haven't seen for weeks.
Yeah. We have not seen Minx for a long time. We have not seen Warren for a long time. And I guess at whatever point Lycan returns to the show, she'll have a very different look, because I'm assuming she's being recast.
Yeah, we'll have 2 more Lycans by the end of the series. That is it for this episode. The YouTube download that we used, spoiler alert, we got it from YouTube, not my own VHSs, because I didn't have a VCR yet. Had some bonuses, a couple of bloopers, right at the start and the end. I think it was more bloopers. The one on the end was a bit of a spoiler, because it's a scene with Brandon and Gina that's obviously from the future, but we don't know if it's a week or 2 weeks or a month into the future. And then I forget what the one at the beginning was. Oh, it was another Gina one where she and Stacey Edwards, Haley, and Todd McKee, Ted, in a scene, and partway through it, she stops and says, "Oh my God, we both just called him Ted. His name is Todd, isn't it?" And I think there's some. I've looked ahead at some of the other upcoming episodes that we have, and someone's added some little commercials to some of them. You saw the one with Eden, right? One commercial.
Yeah, there's 3 in a row with Mercy Walker, and one is for a Perry Mason movie, and I think 2 are for perhaps miniseries or made for TV movies that she was participating in.
Mm-hmm. And then I think the one we're going to look at next had one with Kelly and one with Marcy Walker. So the different sources. They've also been tacking on this week. Whoever's the source for these have been tacking on the trailers. So the coming up this week on Santa Barbara. So there may be some mild spoilers in those, but I looked ahead at about a week's worth, and they're not too egregious. So they don't say who the murderer is or anything. So. Anything else you wanted to talk about for this episode?
No, not really.
All right, then we'll be back after we watch episode 432. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back.
Hello.
The flowers are starting to bloom. We finished episode 432 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Wednesday, April 9th, 1986. Kirk seems confused that his heart donor is a woman. He says, "I thought," and Eden cuts him off before he can continue, but he seems to think that men and women have different hearts.
I suppose a woman's heart might physically be a little bit smaller, maybe, but.
Well, it'll go with his nightgown, or his bathrobe. Eden calls Nick to tell him to continue the investigation. I think she has dejectedly realized that Kirk might pull through at this point.
Yeah.
Cruz arrives in Palo Alto and intercepts a message from Nick, but Eden won't tell him what Nick is investigating for her. Eden is disappointed when she finds out that the only reason Cruz came is because of Madeline's phone call. She seemed really happy to see him and thought that he'd come up there just to see her. Cruz misses his plane in order to spend more time with Eden, but she says, "Oh, go call Santana."
I feel like, all through this episode, Cruz is trying to get her to tell him what she suspects or what the problem is. And I feel like she's going to hold out until, that time when she finally tells him, and, it's overheard on the phone by Kirk or something. There's just so many opportunities to tell him that Kirk wouldn't hear, that I'm pretty sure she's going to go for the moment when Kirk will hear.
No one else shows up to Augusta's party, and she ends up dancing with Lionel. He sends the staff home after they bring him a bathtub, and he starts to fill it with champagne as he recalls that they missed their New Year's Eve ritual, which I had completely forgotten about. Augusta tells him that she's not getting in, so he picks her up and plunks her in the tub. I started to get the feeling that Lionel maybe wasn't the one who did the cancellations based on something someone else said. But I think Augusta had briefly said to Julia that she thought people weren't coming because now that she was single, she was a threat to their marriages. Courtney tells David that his case fell open as she was picking it up, and he believes it. So she palms the cigarette pack and hides it in various places before she manages to sneak it out the door. Pearl sends Julia in to send Courtney to the gazebo to meet him. And while at the Capwell mansion, David hires Julia as his attorney. David tells Julia about how he and Madeline met in Kowloon Harbor. And Julia seems to really like David. Pearl tries to get Courtney to tell him who she thinks the killer is. Eventually she gives in and says she found a cigarette at the bungalow of the same type that David smokes, and she gives Pearl the packet she stole from David's suitcase. Now, in this episode, it didn't look like a silver jewel case. It just looked like a burgundy red packet that was still wrapped in cellophane. And so maybe it was the reflections from the cellophane combined with the poor VHS quality of the previous episode that made it look like a sparkly silver case to me. Or they changed their minds between episodes. I didn't bother going back to confirm. He says, oh, maybe they were Madeline's, but Courtney says, no, Madeline didn't smoke. Julia says they're wasting their time with this and should be focusing on finding someone who saw Pearl sitting in the limo at the time of the murder. I think it's very unlikely that they're going to find someone because the hotel manager and the maid clearly aren't going to help. So unless there was someone in an adjacent bungalow who saw, Pearl sitting there the entire time and can say he, didn't leave except when he ran in just before the maid shrieked. But still, that would have been time for him to murder Madeline. So I don't know how it's going to help.
Yeah, I feel like because she likes David and apparently hasn't really noticed that he's, creeping on her while his wife is being autopsied or wife is being lying on a table. I feel like she's already kind of team David, like she doesn't really want to hear that. So
Yeah.
all I can think is maybe Pearl and Courtney will try to find the woman in white who he glimpsed.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he glimpsed her. He was on the phone with this bookie. Maybe he wasn't totally focused, so maybe he'll remember later that he saw that. Courtney tells Pearl that Madeline and David used to fight and that David has no money of his own. So he now has a bit of a motive. Pearl thinks that David could have called his secretary at the airport in New York and then again at the airport in Santa Barbara. So basically what we thought, and surprisingly, quickly, soap opera time, characters are already figuring out the same things as the viewer only a day or two later.
But I think we should note that the only reason why Pearl and Courtney tell Julia their theory is because they can't get a hold of Cruz, who is of course up in Stanford with and I kind of feel like this is another example where Cruz is kind of letting his personal life influence his professional life a little bit.
Yeah, because he could easily have just asked Eden over the phone, right?
Yeah.
He tried calling her once and then said, oh, better fly up there.
And he's on at least one active case. How many cases is he on, that really depend on him being there? And then it made me think, how many has he actually solved? I'm really, although Cruz kind of projects this uber masculine confidence and competence, I'm not actually sure the competence part is that warranted sometimes.
They still haven't captured the Robin Hood thief who's been robbing the Capwell Hotel.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling some angel-related business may not be complete. Some gang stuff that's still happening there. Maybe something with Danny, maybe. And then Courtney suddenly remembers that person I saw leaving the bungalow that day, or near the bungalow that day, was David. She says, it totally slipped my mind, with Madeline's murder, but it was David. So they're really piling on all the evidence against David. So I have to think it can't be David because a day and 2 days after the murder, he's our only suspect. Everyone else suspects him, and all the evidence points to him.
Yeah, I'm thinking it probably will be someone else. I'm assuming there'll be a little bit of a twist. unless it turns into a storyline where perhaps Julia gets more and more enmeshed with David and is somehow endangered by him or something like that.
Yeah, it would be the weirdest murder mystery if the person who everyone thinks did it from day one is the person, and there were no other suspects yet. I mean, Pearl.
Yeah.
We know Pearl didn't do it because we saw him not do it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that is weird. As I say, I don't remember anything about this, so it'll be interesting to see if there is a twist, if there is some stuff we don't know. But I mean, Courtney still, even with the stuff she told today, I still feel she's a little secretive about things.
Yeah, I think so too. I think she and David have a kind of odd relationship in a way, because even in this episode, they're talking in the entranceway atrium, and then they go upstairs together and they come down together, and it's just kind of weird, their relationship in a way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's possible the actors didn't know what was going on in the writers' heads. Maybe even the directors didn't know, and they were just playing all possibilities, you know.
Yeah.
There's one more thing I was going to say about the murder. And maybe I already said it. Sophia stops by to see Kelly, and she's asleep. So she says, "Oh, I'll come back tomorrow." And Cece asks her to stay. And so they have a discussion about Kelly, and Sophia thinks Kelly needs a psychiatrist. And Cece thinks a psychiatrist is only useful for children like Brandon. Kelly's an adult and can shake it off with the support of her family. The supportive family thing is, I think, really big with Cece. Thinks it will cure all things. I don't think this is the first time he's tried to pull that. Sophia says she'll suggest it to Kelly anyway, and Cece says, "Well, I will recommend against it." And then, to Sophia's surprise, Cece invites her to dinner. And they arrive at the Orient Express just as Lionel leans over the bathtub and kisses Augusta. "Next time, knock before you enter," says Lionel. Augusta says, "Don't say it. The magic is gone." Sophia laughs, and Cece rolls his eyes. So I don't know if are they going to have Augusta and Lionel get together so soon after their divorce.
And, there does seem to be some sparks flying potentially between Sophia and Cece again.
Mm-hmm.
Reached a bit of a détente, but I thought, the whole dinner thing with them was kind of playful and nice too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this actually may help Sophia if Lionel and Augusta get back together, because it will keep Lionel out of Cece's thoughts, constantly thinking that she's sneaking off to see him. Once again, I don't remember anything. I remember something about Cece and Sophia, which I think is in the next 6 months to a year. Can't be certain though, but I don't remember anything about Lionel and Augusta. I don't know if they ever get back together or if they get married. I have no memory. So,
well, I'm hoping we find out soon, in relation to the murder, why Madeline was actually going to that bungalow and who she was meeting. That would be a really important point that nobody seems to be bothering to really investigate yet.
I feel that with the way these characters aren't really doing things quite correctly, Madeline's going to just ask David, "Hey, I did see you at that bungalow last Thursday, didn't I?" And we'll see what happens from there. So.
Courtney, you mean?
Courtney. Well, who did I say?
Madeline.
Madeline. Okay. Well, at least I was close. If I'd said Cece, that would have been really off. And that was it for the episode. We had full credits, and Madeline is gone already. Boom. Not even in there at all. Not
no
even in
flashbacks then.
Well, not since her last episode, I guess.
I guess they
not
could
since she was removed from the main cast. So she would only have been in the day player credits if
Yeah.
the flashback was in this episode. So we will be seeing her presumably at the bottom if she ever shows up in flashbacks.
Yeah, I'm assuming if she does, it'll be perhaps if Pearl's case goes to trial and over the course of testimony, people are remembering seeing her and what happened or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it depends on what they do. I mean, because you could do a flashback, I suppose, just with another actor from the back or something like that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, unless IMDb is wrong, I'm pretty sure she's in a few more episodes. So. And we have David Laurent is being played by Brian Matthews, whose name doesn't sound familiar, and he didn't really look familiar, so I don't know what else he's done. Someday we'll do a spotlight on him. And there are no day players today. Last time we had Dr. Mills, First Nurse, Kirk's Doctor, and Angel. Today we just have nothing after Robin Wright's credit. So fairly straightforward credits, new cast member. So I guess money-wise, they are paying David with the Madeline money. So the mad money.
Mm-hmm.
We will be back after episode 433. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 433 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Thursday, April 10th, 1986. And the copy we had two ads at the beginning, one for Long John Silver's with Marcy Walker, and one for a Chinese seaweed soup starring Kelly Capwell.
That was a very weird one.
It was. I was not expecting that. I thought, oh, is this an ad for exercising or something? And then it turned out that was just what Kelly was doing in the ad. All right. Cruz apologizes to Brandon and Santana for coming home so late yesterday. Santana tries to keep the truth about Madeline from Brandon, and Santana is annoyed every time Cruz mentions work. She's in a really foul mood this whole episode.
Yeah, and therefore so is Cruz. They're sort of almost barely tolerating each other at this point. So the honeymoon is over real quick in this relationship.
Yeah, what a bizarre turnaround.
Yeah.
Brandon tells Santana they should go home soon because what she and Cruz are doing isn't right. Gina had told him that before. And so Santana and Cruz invite Mason over so that they can reveal to Brandon that Santana and Cruz are married. He doesn't, flip out over the news. He seems happy with it, but it's not, he doesn't really know Santana's his mother, though, so he might be more excited if he knew that.
I felt like in that scene, he was actually more excited to see Mason than he was about anything that Cruz and Santana had to say to him.
Yeah, Mason ends up taking him back to the Capwells for lunch and to play. He carries him out on his shoulders. Then Cruz reveals he's got to leave because Madeline's autopsy report is complete. So I think there's already some cracks in the Cruz and Santana marriage.
Most definitely. And you can see Cruz's jaw is kind of set, and he's sort of gritting his teeth almost every time he and Santana have one of these interactions.
Mm-hmm. They do talk about the fact that he's a cop and will often have to run out.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other funny thing about it. She's actually pissed off at him all episode, but it's not even so much about anything to do with Eden directly.
No, not entirely. Kelly goes to Nick's place to pick up her things. And they're both kind of sad about it. After she leaves, she goes to a psychiatrist who we don't, I think, learn the name of. It's a woman. And maybe her name starts with R, like all the doctors on Santa Barbara. But the psychiatrist does a lot of that. Oh, what do you think you should do? And at the end, finally offers the suggestion that maybe Nick is a lot like your father. And Kelly says, no, they're like night and day. This is not an edible thing. I already have a father, and storms out. So Cece was right. That psychiatrist was completely useless. I think she even said Sophia recommended her, didn't she?
Yeah, I actually, I think we should say that before Kelly goes to the psychiatrist, she actually stops by Cruz and Santana's, and she asks Cruz to please look out for Nick.
Right.
And Cruz jumps at this as an opportunity to get away from Santana. And so he actually, after he goes back to work and does his things at work, he actually goes and sits with Nick. And we have this really interesting sequence. This sort of spans the middle of the episode, where we almost have this split screen thing where Kelly is having this conversation with the therapist, and where Nick and Cruz are having this conversation. And it seemed to me that by the end of both of those conversations, they both almost reach a similar conclusion. I think Kelly's is a little later because she's had a much more skeptical conversation with the psychiatrist, but I felt like they both almost reached the conclusion that this whole relationship had to end because Kelly needed it to end. It wasn't really anything to do with Dylan. It wasn't really anything to do with a specific thing Nick did. It's just that, you know, he was not the right person for her. Mm-hmm. And so she was basically has been doing whatever to sabotage it so she doesn't have to be with him.
Mm-hmm.
I actually, and you know, I feel like I need to rewatch part of this episode. I actually took exactly the opposite thing from her time with the psychologist, who was actually, this whole appointment was actually set up by Sophia. I thought the psychologist said, "Oh, Nick isn't like your father, is he?"
Oh, I thought I was going by my notes when I wrote that, and maybe I missed a word. So.
And I thought Kelly had reacted to that as, you know, are you saying that I only am attracted to men who are like my father?
Oh, okay.
So I kind of took it the opposite because, you know, and because Dylan has been trying so hard to pretend he's like CC, mm-hmm. and superficially, maybe that might have been why Kelly chose him to sabotage a relationship. But at any rate, I thought that entire suggestion was a bit off on the part of the psychologist. And I did think that Kelly and Nick separately reached a more correct conclusion.
Mm-hmm. It's worth mentioning that Nick and Cruz were drinking beer this whole time. So while Santana's at home waiting, he's going to come home smelling like beer. But that'll be at the end of the episode. Nick declines a dinner invitation from Cruz. And then just after Cruz leaves, Dylan shows up. And Nick tells Dylan, well, you're never going to see Kelly again. You've lost her forever. Dylan says, no, I've won. And Nick says, no, she just used you as an excuse to keep from making a commitment to me. She has no use for you now. And Dylan says, you just wait and see.
Throughout this episode, as many of the viewers probably feel as well, Nick has become this presence who no one really wants to see.
Dylan,
yes.
Brandon asked Cece if he knew that Santana and Cruz were married. They had mentioned to Brandon that they'd been keeping it a secret, and they gave permission to start telling people to Brandon. So Mason says, well, Cece practically gave away the bride. And Mason asks Kelly how she's doing. And he says he wishes he could offer some words of wisdom, but he points out that he's messed up his own life just as frequently. I was really happy to see a Mason and Kelly scene, even though really short. Cece asks Sam what his plans are, and Sam says he's leaving Santa Barbara. Dylan shows up, and Sam tells him it's absurd that he still thinks he's going to get together with Kelly. Dylan says, everything I did at the casino is out of reach of the law. And, you know, I think just Brick would end up getting hurt if you try and push this. So he gives Sam his check for his share of the casino. And Sam says, you just lost the last friend you will ever have.
I feel like this might be the last time we see Sam in this series. Does that jive with your research?
I only have a first and last episode number, and I have a number for him coming up, but it's not this episode. So maybe he does one more appearance or comes back later.
Yeah, I felt like he left on a, regardless, I felt like he left on a high note this episode.
Mm-hmm. Maybe he comes back later as a murder suspect.
Yeah, yeah.
So it might be just a one-day interrogation scene. Yeah, we'll see. But it's not too far in the future. His last day. So. Mary, for some reason, is the one who has to change the sheets on Kelly's bed now that she's moving in. Dylan overhears that Kelly is moving back into the mansion. His ears perk up when he overhears that. CC tells Dylan he knows why Kelly and Nick canceled their wedding. He says, right now, I want to tear you apart. Get out of my house, get out of my hotel, get out of my town. Because, yes, Dylan was still living at the Capitol Hotel. And Dylan says, get out of your town. Did you buy Santa Barbara? I have enough money to do whatever I want. Cece says, if I ever see you around Kelly again, you'll be very sorry. So I think that's another potential suspect.
Mm-hmm.
Dylan says, I'll do as I please. And he promptly finds Kelly at the Orient Express, takes out a ring, and asks her to marry him at once. The look on Kelly's face. I don't know if she got an Emmy for just that look. It was pretty funny.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you'll talk about this at some later point, but certainly from the scuttlebutt, you've gathered that maybe it wasn't entirely acting on Robin Wright's part.
Mm-hmm.
React to Dylan that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard to impute exactly what her issue was, but the rumor has it that she's the reason he left the show. So Bobby and Mason ambush Mark. Mason suggests a disappointingly small payoff for Bobby. I think it was like $200 or something, wasn't it? And then he didn't even have the whole amount. Mason had to throw in 50 of his own. And Mason says if Mark hurts Mary, he'll take her away from him. I strongly feel that's going to happen one way or the other here. Mark's doctor inadvertently reveals to Mary that Mark is impotent. Mark sets up a nice dinner, candlelit dinner with flowers at the Orient Express, which Mason eavesdrops on at the next table. And it goes pretty well until Mary wants to talk about feelings. And Mark suddenly says, all we ever do is talk. And after only a couple of harsh sentences, Mary says, I'm going home. Mason asks Mark, what have you done now? Mason heads home for Madeline's funeral. And whoever greets him says, oh, you're a bit early. It's tonight. So that's interesting. So we've got, in this episode, we have Brandon having lunch at the Capwells, dinner with Santana, and a funeral must be happening later because we don't actually see the start of the funeral.
Yeah.
Mary and Mason talk a bit about Madeline, and Mary thinks he doesn't seem very grief-stricken. He says, well, I'm sorry, but I'm not grief-stricken. So Mary will skip the funeral, and Mark shows up to apologize to Mary and asks her to meet him for dinner and wear something exciting. She agrees, but before she heads over there, Mason encounters her at the gazebo. Mary says, I found out something today. And Mason says, one night with a prostitute doesn't mean he doesn't love you. And Mary says, what? Something between Kelly's shocked expression at Dylan's proposal and Mary's, what? We had some good reaction shots this episode.
Now, I thought that the whole conversation where he says to wear something exciting actually happened before they had the dinner where he blew up at Mary.
I thought that was a lunch, but I might have mixed things up because this was a very weird episode to dissect and group into the storylines, because Mason was flitting all over town, Brandon was flitting all over town, and
Cruz
Mary
as far away from Santana as possible.
Mary was here and there, and so maybe that I accidentally reversed a couple of couple of things.
Dylan was showing up to piss off everyone, and
But I had thought it was lunch and then a second dinner. But maybe I mixed that up. Either way, I don't. She'll be going to either home or the dinner now that she's found that out. I guess she'll ask Mason to tell more about it.
yeah, I think she'll want a little more detail on that.
She might not come home tonight, and then Mark can be the one who misses her all night. And because of the weird way this episode had to be deconstructed, I end on a sort of a boring note. By the time Cruz comes home, Brandon is already back at Santana's, or at the beach house, actually, where they live. And they've been waiting for him to come to eat their dinner because Brandon says he's hungry. So this must be many hours after the lunch Rosa made him at the Capwell house. Santana finally snaps and asks him if he needed to make another surprise trip to Stanford. Cruz tells Santana that Kirk's got a good chance of living a normal life. That's kind of a dud summary ending, but that's kind of how it ended up. So I was going to end on the proposal, but it was just too hard to organize it that way.
And the actual end episode, as I think you mentioned, actually ended with Mason and Mary having that conversation where he inadvertently revealed that Mark had been with a prostitute.
Yeah. So I think Mary and Mark are on the skids.
Santana and
Cruz
are
on the
not doing
skids.
much better.
Kelly and Nick are on the skids. Kelly and Dylan are already on the skids, and he's only just started to propose.
And Eden would like to be majorly on the skids with Kirk, but she's still stuck with him. So.
She's rallying and proving to be a good candidate for a transplant and pulling through. And so I guess he's had the transplant then. So I guess we'll see Kirk. I think it'll be a day or two before we see him. Give him time to recover from the surgery.
It'll be interesting. I'm assuming being a soap opera, we might see a few scenes with Kirk topless. It'll be interesting to see if they remember to kind of put a scar on it.
Yeah. And then I guess, he wouldn't be immediately safe to travel, so Eden might stay up in Stanford a little bit longer before she comes back. That might be, some logistics to keep her out of town for a little bit, so they can get something else in place. Plus, maybe that gives time. I think they almost kind of need a reason to keep Gina and Eden apart, because in a way, Eden's a potential ally for Gina. And if Gina, with all her skulking around, got the opportunity to talk to Eden, she actually might. So but we'll see what Nick has found in the stereo cable store that keeps track of all the customers who buy a few feet of cable. Oh, and tomorrow's a Friday episode. So we will be back after we watch episode 434. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Welcome to the latest edition of the Kirk Cranston Trauma Tracker. Here is our young friend Kirk Cranston, who over the last several months has endured injuries to his hand and his eye and psychological issues, and now he has had a heart attack, and the doctors have said his heart will have to be removed. So once that happens, he will be without a heart, and even if they replace it, in theory, Kirk Cranston will forever be missing his heart.
If they're expecting to find one as cold and selfish as Kirk's heart, it'll take them forever.
I mean, if the doctors feel that there is no hope, I couldn't help but think.
No, you're right.
So this is now the first extremely major component of his body that Kirk Cranston has lost, and we are now taking bets on what the second piece will be. I am putting my money on the head. I know, long odds. Anyway, we'll be back to see. And the next installment of the Kirk Cranston Trauma Tracker. Worst Ludwig von Drake ever.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 434, which originally aired Friday, April 11th, 1986. And someone kindly put one of the commercials for Santa Barbara at the beginning. And it was the classic Watch the Love Crazed Maniacs weekdays on Santa Barbara. So I think this is the first of many wacky Santa Barbara ads that we will see in the coming years. So I think someone at the network decided it was time to start pushing that aspect of Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
So that was really a fun one. And if you're lucky, I'll reenact that for you as an extra. All right, Mason. I can't actually quite see it from this distance. Mason tells Mary he was joking about Mark hiring a prostitute, but Mary can see that he's lying. Mark arrives, and he's forced to admit it to Mary. Later, Mason finds her crying, and they kiss. Mary says she doesn't care about the consequences, but it wouldn't be fair to Mason or Mark.
Mm-hmm.
Mary calls Mark's doctor and asks if Mark's condition could be temporary and if it could have been different with another woman. The doctor is surprised by her question, since she said she had talked to Mark. She says, "Oh, well, we didn't talk about that." The doctor says it's impossible for Mark to be with anyone. Mary tells Mark she almost made a mistake tonight, but she couldn't go through with it, just like Mark. Mary then tries to get him to tell her that he's impotent, but he just says, "Oh, it only happened this one time." And Mary leaves angrily. She really wants Mark to just come out and say it, and he just will not.
And I think she has maybe a sense in this that it's maybe not quite as bad because he could not have actually performed with another woman. So he maybe technically hasn't cheated on her.
Mm-hmm.
But what she doesn't know, of course, is that he beat up the woman he couldn't perform with, which, I think, and to my mind, would be a lot worse. And I don't think she would be very happy to hear that either. I don't think that kind of behavior is even on her radar at this point.
No, and I guess with the, not going to trial or anything, she might have to hear. Well, I can't imagine Mason just blurting it out. So
No.
I think she may run into Bobby at the clinic someday. And I think that will get her to thinking about Janice's warnings, maybe, because maybe that's the kind of thing that Janice was talking about.
I think too, it's possible that, Mark will get a bit violent with Mary as well. That's another possibility. And she'll kind of blame herself or whatever, and then perhaps realize that he's behaved this way with other women before.
Yeah, I guess it's just a matter of when things will fall apart. I suspect the May sweeps. And we are still at the beginning quarter of April. So Augusta hopes Julia didn't miss her party because she was with that unshaven, pigtailed excuse for a man. Julia says, "I like purple." Didn't he bludgeon somebody? Says Augusta. She was a horror. It's probably a good thing I never met her. I find this an odd statement. She was a horror. It's probably a good thing I didn't meet her. I wonder if we have a new suspect. Very low-key introduced.
Mm-hmm.
What if Madeline was seeing Lionel? What if the woman in white was Augusta?
That's interesting.
Yeah. Or what if somehow Augusta did have some dealings with Madeline that she's keeping secret? Because I just found it a very odd thing to say.
I think it's interesting too, because in some ways I can see Madeline and Augusta being somewhat similar in that they're both quite snobbish, I think. Augusta came across as being perhaps slightly nicer of the two, but they're actually birds of a feather. So I'd almost wondered at one point if their paths had crossed before in some way.
Yeah, or maybe they were using that bungalow to plot something against Cece. You know, maybe, I don't know. Maybe does Augusta know Grant Capwell? Yeah. Anyway, it'd be interesting to see if it was just a turn of phrase that just struck me the wrong way, or if there's really something there. Then, having met David, Augusta tries to get Julia to have her invited to the memorial service. So I think Augusta is thinking of David as a potential suitor for her, although she's not aware that Julia's, as far as I can tell, interested in him also. So this could be another Jack Stanfield Lee situation.
And again, neither of them are entertaining this whole idea without thinking through that he's literally just buried his wife. I mean, would you really want to be with someone who basically turns around 48 hours after their wife is murdered?
Yeah, it's some kind of goofy stuff in this storyline.
Yeah,
but we still don't really know what's going on. So maybe that's all just done to help wrongfoot us a bit and not think about it too much. But I have to think that it can't be David, otherwise it's too obvious.
It does seem obvious at this point. Yeah.
Pearl and Courtney break into the beach house in order to read Cruz's file. Cruz catches them. Pearl says Courtney thinks David did it. Cruz says he's on the same page. He says there are a couple of shops in town that sell that French cigarette. And he also heard from Madeline's lawyer that Madeline left no will and David will get everything. But she was in the process of filing for divorce. And a few weeks from now, he would have gotten nothing.
Wow.
Cruz suddenly notices the date. I forgot, he says. Pearl says, you forgot the day Halley's Comet comes closest to Earth? Now, I looked up the day Halley's Comet comes closest to Earth, and I ended up finding a result that said the day Halley's Comet got closest to the sun, which may not be the same as closest to Earth. And that was February 9th, 1986. So almost 2 months ago. But perhaps there's a difference between Earth and Sun. And I didn't spend a long time searching for articles about it. I just wanted to do a quick check to see if it did sync up.
Now, Halley's Comet is mentioned a few times in this episode. So it was evidently a big deal.
I think I remember it being a big deal in reality.
I
think we may have gone out to a beach somewhere to look at it. Lionel is on the beach with a telescope watching Halley's Comet. Augusta shows up. At first, she doesn't understand Lionel's interest, but when he shows her, she says it does give it a sort of smudgy appeal. And he ends up showing her the comet and other celestial bodies. And they spend a nice evening on the beach.
So apparently Augusta does not go to Madeline's memorial service as she was threatening to do.
Cruz asks Eden if he remembers what they did on the same day last year. They both recall their day at the pond. Cruz says he's there at the Capwells on a case. And for a second, she thinks it's Kirk. And Cruz wonders why she thinks it would be Kirk. So, I don't know why Eden wouldn't automatically assume it's the murder, but I guess she's got Kirk on the brain. So she is, of course, was thinking of the Kirk trying to kill her case when in fact Cruz would think of it as the Gina trying to kill her case.
Yeah, Cruz ends up, I guess he's still in some respects trying to keep away from Santana. He ends up going back to the Capwells with Pearl and Courtney. Ostensibly, Courtney's going to look for David's day planner, was it? To see if that ties him in any closer to the murder. And while they're kind of waiting to see if she manages to find it, he says, I'm going to go. I'm not going to wait around. I'm just going to go walk around a bit. And that's where he runs into Eden. And of course, we get their theme song immediately as they meet.
And some flashbacks of the pond day.
Yeah.
I didn't backtrack to see if it was exactly April, whatever, 16th or whatever we're at. So Eden meets David as he is contemplating Madeline's urn. David says it's nice to know that Madeline's heart is still beating. Courtney looks really good in her funeral going outfit.
Mm-hmm.
She has a really cool makeup and hairstyle. David almost catches her going through his briefcase. Cruz asks if Madeline wanted to be cremated, but Pearl says no. Courtney was kind of surprised to find out she had been. So Cruz says, well, I would better go over that coroner's report very, very thoroughly. So perhaps David's ordering Madeline's cremation is a bit suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what, he thinks he could be hiding after there's already been an autopsy, but.
Yeah, I sort of wondered about that as well. The only thing I thought was that perhaps she was cremated because they're on the West Coast, and I would assume if she was being buried, she would have to be buried on the East Coast, I imagine, where the family has a plot or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of wondered about that. And it's interesting too. We don't see any indications of the rest of the family, the East Coast branch attending the funeral, although they are mentioned in passing.
I know, you would think Grant would want to attend his daughter's funeral.
Well, I think one of them, and I can't remember who it is, when they're kind of coming out of the service said, oh, and wasn't it nice to see Madeline's parents or something like that?
Oh,
I
didn't catch
they
that.
Couldn't stay. But any interaction with the East Coast Capwells has taken place off screen.
I didn't catch that. I'll have to listen to that again. Because this would be the first time we hear anything about Madeline and Courtney's mother.
Mm-hmm.
Mason tells Eden that David's eulogy didn't sound like the Madeline they'd been living with. Courtney tells Cruz she Courtney tells Pearl the service was awful. She felt like David was putting on a show. And then Pearl spots Hallie's comet. Courtney tells Cruz she couldn't get a hold of David's date book, and he tells her to go back to the house so David won't think she's involved when Cruz comes in to question him in a few minutes. Cruz asks David to talk to him outside, but they end up staying inside because David tries to put it off until tomorrow, but Courtney blurts out, it can't wait. I can't take any more of this. So, of course, now David knows Courtney's involved. David says, you've always hated me, which is an interesting revelation.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that look was between them. Cruz tells David that he can have a lawyer present, and Mason says it's a shame Julia scampered off just as David needed a lawyer. So we don't actually see the interrogation really in this episode. So that will be continuing on Monday, I guess.
But it's interesting. We do get a little bit of a hint that there has been some negative history between Courtney and David. Mm-hmm. And perhaps that's why Courtney has jumped to the conclusion that David was responsible.
Mm-hmm.
If we're expecting a twist.
There may be more that comes out with that, that why she always hated him.
Yeah.
Dylan asks Kelly to marry him. Kelly says, what are you talking about? Dylan says, I know you're going to marry me, even if you don't know it yourself. He shows up at the Capwell mansion later and tells her, you're not the kind of woman who can make her own decisions. You need to be told. You need a father and a lover all in one. This sounds like a great thing to put on a greeting card if you're trying to win over a woman and you've asked to marry you.
Yeah, Dylan is sounding pretty deluded this episode.
Mm-hmm.
And well, he's his usual creepy self, of course, but deluded and a little bit dangerous this episode, too.
He picks a couple of pink roses from the bush near the front door of the mansion. He smells them and grins. Eden tells Kelly she heard about the wedding. She says, Kelly says she told Nick about Dylan. And Eden says that maybe Nick is waiting for her to come back and try to fix things. So she should make the first move and not wait for Nick to forgive her. I'm not entirely sure that's true, but it's worth a shot.
It was, I don't think that's necessarily going to pan out either, but it was kind of nice to hear Eden give Kelly a bit of tough talk about, stepping up and not just waiting for Nick to kind of do all the work of chasing after her, forgiving her,
Kelly looks out the window, and I think she sees Courtney and Pearl at the gazebo. Because just after Pearl spotted Hallie's comet, they cut to Kelly looking out the window, and I thought, did he see Kelly there, or did he see Hallie's comet? She has to put away her wedding dress, which was laid out on the bed for her, and then she has a shower. When she comes out, the window is wide open. And there are 2 pink roses on the bed. Dylan comes out from behind the wardrobe and picks up a rose and smells it. Sweet, he says. Kelly looks like she's going to throw up.
Well, this is shades of the Carnation Killer.
I mean, if you knew someone had been stalked by a killer who left flowers, would you really leave flowers on someone's bed, even if they're a different type? Wouldn't you think that would be just too creepy to do?
So far, by my count, maybe I'm off by a few, we've had 4 suitors go nuts, basically.
4 Kelly suitors or 4 overall suitors?
4 overall. So, of course, we had Peter Flint.
Mm-hmm.
And we seem to be seeing Mark going off the deep end with Mary. We, of course, have had Kirk going completely nuts, and I'm expecting more of same when he wakes up from his coma. And of course, now Dylan is definitely starting to channel Peter Flint.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good thing there's room in that psycho gazebo. Well, that is it for a Friday episode, and they really teed up a lot of things for Monday, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I'm glad Kelly's in her house where, there's a lot of staff and family around that she could call for help, assuming Dylan, does something negative. But I think Dylan's still just deluded into thinking she just needs the right atmosphere to agree to marry him.
The nice thing about the Dylan situation is no one else in the cast at all likes him. So, unlike the situation with Kirk or even Peter in the early days, where Cece was right behind him, supportive, just thought he was the most upstanding person. Absolutely no one thinks that of Dylan. So Kelly will get support, I think, if and when things go south with him.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm looking forward to seeing the next episode. And I think we're going to watch it right away. And we're going to try and watch it on Zoom because there's something fun in it that I recall. So anything else you want to say to wrap up week 80? What are we at, 89?
I don't think so. I'm just trying to sit here remembering if I saw Haley's comet. I think I very vaguely remember us going out onto our porch and kind of looking up at the sky and saying, oh, is that it? Do you think that's it? I bet that's it.
I know I remember when I lived in Vancouver going out to see that one meteor shower that one year.
Mm-hmm.
But I assume we went out to see Haley's comet somewhere. I don't know. No job prospects yet at Expo, so planning to go back. Probably still writing finals at this point. Still don't understand statistics.
Mm-hmm.
But Doctor Who's on every Saturday, so that's something. And did I tell you about the Doctor Who club that I discovered, the Time Meddlers of Vancouver?
Mhm.
Started attending their meetings, and I would return to Vancouver over the summer several times to attend Time Meddlers meetings and to go to Expo 86, which of course wasn't happening in my city because I was back in Kelowna. But there were a lot of performers playing at Expo 86. And I was really excited about the big draw, which was that they were going to have Bill Cosby performing. And so I waited in line at Lougheed Mall at Ticketmaster. I think it was called Ticketmaster then already. And by the time I got to the front of the line, Bill Cosby was sold out. So I went for my second choice of Bob Newhart. So we'll talk about a little bit about Expo and that concert as we get to the summer of '86. But right now we're still in April, and we are just trying to get through school. And you are finishing grade
12.
12. So you're doing well. You're not doing finals yet because it's still April for you. All right, we will see you in 2 weeks when we return with week 90 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
It's been traveling around the universe ever since with the frozen wastes of time. Just so it could be with us tonight.
Well, if you put it that way, I suppose it does give the night a sort of smudgy appeal.
There's a much better one playing just down the street.